Hello, students, and welcome to this video lecture on the age of imperialism in the United States. We're going to travel back to the United States, a place we have not been to since the American Revolution, and talk about how the United States became an imperial power just like the European nations that we've talked about so far. So let's jump right into it. Let's kind of catch up a little bit about where we are in the United States in the late 1800s and even into the early 1900s in order to kind of understand how the United States kind of uses imperialism, you have to know kind of where they are. The United States is located in what's known as the Western Hemisphere. Western Hemisphere. Most of the power that they're going to exert in the imperial area is going to be in the Western Hemisphere, that is North and South America. Since we last discussed the United States, they've been on a push to conquer most of their area, their immediate area, that is, through things like the Louisiana Purchase, which we talked about briefly, the Texas annexation, the secession of Mexico, Gadsden Purchase, all these things, all these individual westward expansion kind of ideas all have their own personal story that kind of go with them as to why we now have that as a part of our country. The main idea that you need to make sure that you get out of this area, though, is manifest destiny. Manifest destiny is the idea that Americans kind of adopted in the 1800s that said that it is the God-given right of all Americans to expand from East Coast to West Coast. So under Manifest Destiny, make sure to write down that it is our, as Americans, God-given right to expand from East Coast to West Coast and conquer the entire area. That idea, much like the social Darwinism concept we have talked about, completely ignores all ethnic groups and ethnic people that exist in those territories prior to the Americans arriving. By the end of the 1800s, the USA will dominate most of the continent and will control have a lot of the power in the Western Hemisphere. We're going to start expanding overseas with an event known as the Spanish-American War. In the 1800s, early 1800s, the Spanish Empire is going to start collapsing. One of the main areas that's going to fall apart is going to be Cuba. Now, Cuba had been a colony of Spain for several hundred years since the 1500s, and now in the 1800s, it's going to try and break away. There's going to be lots of Americans that are going to be located on the island of Cuba, and the United States is going to want to protect those Americans. So they're going to send a warship down called the USS Maine. Any American that wants to leave Cuba can, and they will provide protection for them and take them back to Cuba if they eventually want to return. One night, while this American warship, the USS Maine, is in the harbor, it's going to experience a explosion, and all the sailors and soldiers on board, a tremendous amount of them, are going to die. When that occurs, the United States is going to blame the Spanish for the explosion and is going to declare war on Spain. In the following war, known as the Spanish-American War, Spain is actually going to be decimated. Over the last about 100 years or so, the Spanish Empire has been falling apart. They are broke. Their navy and their army is just small pieces of what it used to be, its mighty glory. And so the United States, as a world power now, is going to easily kind of destroy them and conquer most of their colonies. In the peace treaty that followed, the United States is going to get several overseas colonies: Puerto Rico, Guam, the Philippines, and Midway. We're also going to become what's known as the protector of Cuba, which means that if anyone tries to conquer Cuba, we're going to come to their aid and protect them. This also gives us a little bit more power over Cuba than we had before. So by the end of the Spanish-American War, we're going to have colonies all around the world, and we're going to start advancing. We're going to start changing those colonies to suit our needs. Military bases are going to be placed on all of those colonies. And we're going to have particular trouble with the island chain of the Philippines, which, if you look at the map here, is located right over here near China. So what had kind of happened with the Philippines is that the Philippines were originally a Spanish colony. They had been, just like the Cubans, had been trying to rise up and try and destroy the power of the Spanish. Instead of us sending lots of Marines to the Philippines to fight the Spanish forces, we just gave these Filipino nationalists guns, ammunition, money, and allowed them to kind of um, fight for us. When the war was over and the Filipino people declared independence, we then swept in and said, "Nope, sorry, actually, you're a colony of ours now," and that really sucked. So the Filipinos, led by the same exact guy we gave the guns to, actually starts a guerrilla resistance movement against us. Over the course of the next 3 years, hundreds of thousands of people are going to die, including 4,200 Americans. But the Philippines is going to come to our control. This is just an example of the fact that the United States is not necessarily going to be a benevolent and peaceful imperial power. We are going to have our same problems just like the Europeans did. Some other examples of U.S. imperialism is the Panama Canal. Panama is going to want to break away from Colombia. We're going to help them, and in return, they're going to let us build the Panama Canal. Now, the Panama Canal is going to be extremely important because it's going to cut ocean travel from East Coast to West Coast in half. The way that we're going to support them is we're going to send in warships to support their resistance. And then that Panama Canal is going to help us out tremendously over the next 100 years, and even is one of the most widely used shipping lanes in the world in 2016. Kind of our last major topic today is known as the Monroe Doctrine. And this is kind of where the United States kind of really shows off its power. In 1823, now this is after we had won the American Revolution, after we had won the War of 1812, after Napoleon has been defeated, the Spanish Empire is going to start falling apart. This is what leads eventually to the Cuban incident and the Spanish-American War. However, with all those brand new free countries springing up all across North and South America, Europeans are kind of looking at those independent countries and wondering, can I conquer them? Should I conquer them? Well, the United States is actually going to jump in and say, you know what? We're not going to play this game, not like what you guys will eventually do in Africa and Asia. The Americas, North and South America, are off limits. We are the protectors of the Americas, and you will not conquer any of North or South American territory. They are our protection. Um, Luckily for us, the Europeans are going to respect that decision. In return, we are not going to get any of the colonies as part of the Berlin Conference that happens in a couple decades after this. We're going to have very limited impact in Asia, but we are going to have a tremendous impact in North and South America. If you look at the Monroe Doctrine, it doesn't really say what we will do if the Europeans attempt to conquer. We just tell them, don't conquer. Well, in the early 1900s, President Theodore Roosevelt is going to add something to it called the Roosevelt Corollary. And in that Roosevelt Corollary, he's going to say the USA will use military force to enforce the Monroe Doctrine. And one of his big sayings is speak softly, but carry a big stick. We're going to talk a little bit more about what that means in class. As kind of a show of force, the United States under President Teddy Roosevelt is going to build what's called the Great White Fleet. It's going to be 9 advanced, the most technologically advanced warships that we can create in the early 1900s. And those 9 ships are going to be painted on the side a big USA. Then that fleet of 9 warships, known as the Great White Fleet, is going to sail around the world, stopping in ports in London, in France, Spain, Portugal, Italy, in Africa and Asia. They're going to stop at all these major ports around the world and have big parties. Essentially, what they're doing with this sailing tour is to show the Europeans that the United States is an imperial power, and we have arrived. So don't mess with us. We're going to look a little bit more at this in class. But at this time, please make sure that you do your quiz later today.